The desert at night is not silent. That is the first lie everyone tells. They say the dunes sleep beneath the moon, still and eternal. But the truth is that the desert breathes. It whispers through the sand, sighs beneath your boots, and moans with the memory of things buried too long beneath the shifting earth. I learned this as I stood before the tomb we were about to violate. It lay half consumed by the desert, a jagged wound in the side of an unnamed hill. The moon, pale and indifferent, hung low over us, its light turning the dunes into undulating silver waves. Around me, my companions worked in tense silence. For men, all of them mercenaries of academia turned criminals of convenience. The dig lamps burned dimly, their flickering light crawling across the half-revealed stone lintel, where no cartouche could be found. That was what made it so valuable. Every tomb in Egypt has a name. Every pharaoh, even the false ones, leaves behind a mark, a hieroglyph, a signature of power. But not this one. The entrance before us was utterly blank. The stone smooth, untouched by history's chisel. It should not have existed, and yet here it was, hidden beneath a century of sand and denial. They said it belonged to a nameless dynasty, older than Narmer, older than any known civilization. I had heard the rumors back when I still lectured at Cambridge. Whispers about an unrecorded ruler, a female pharaoh, erased by her successors for crimes against the gods themselves. My colleagues dismissed it as myth. I, however, had a different instinct. Now, standing there with a chisel in one hand and a lamp in the other, I felt vindicated and afraid. "Graves," said Rafik, our guide, in a hoarse whisper, "you are sure this is not cursed ground?" I smiled at him, though my lips were cracked from the dry wind. "Everything in Egypt is cursed, Rafik. That's why it's worth money." He didn't laugh. None of them did. The air grew heavier as we broke the last of the stone seal. It came loose with a sigh, not the hard crack of centuries yielding to metal, but a slow, organic release, as if the tomb itself were exhaling after too long a silence. The smell that escaped was not rot, not exactly. The air that touched my face carried a winter chill. We went in single file, our boots crunching on fine dust. The walls were unadorned at first, rough-hewn stone, dry and dead. But deeper in, we began to see the markings. Not carved, but burned into the walls. Black sigils that shimmered faintly when the lamplight passed over them. They hurt to look at, twisting in ways that defied the eye. Hieroglyphs, and yet not. They seemed to rearrange themselves when I blinked. "Looks like proto-dynastic," murmured Clark, one of my hired men, a drunkard and failed linguist. "But no, that's impossible. These symbols." "Don't think," I said sharply. "Photograph, catalog. We'll study later." But I lied. I wanted to study them now. My hands trembled as I traced the nearest symbol with a gloved finger. It was shaped like a rising sun, but inverted, its rays curling downward, swallowing the horizon. The moment I touched it, my lamp flickered, and for an instant, I thought I heard a voice. Distant and low, like a woman murmuring beneath the earth. I pulled my hand back. "Wind," I said, though there was none. The corridor opened into a chamber supported by immense granite pillars. The ceiling was lost in shadow. Around us stood canopic jars, their lids carved not with the usual heads of gods, but smooth, featureless faces. At the center, a black sarcophagus sat upon a dais of gold-veined obsidian. No cartouche, no title, just the presence. I felt it even before we approached. A heaviness in the air that pressed down on the lungs, as though we had entered the pressure of deep water. My companions muttered prayers in English, Arabic, and something that was neither. The lid of the sarcophagus bore the faint impression of a woman's shape, arms crossed over her chest. Her crown, though eroded, bore traces of twin serpents, the uraeus of pharaohs. But her face had been carved away. Someone or something had erased her identity with deliberate violence. I should have felt triumph. Instead, I felt small. When we finally pried open the lid, the silence that followed was absolute. No one breathed. The dust hung suspended in the air like frozen smoke. Inside lay the remains of a woman wrapped in darkened linen. Her body was impossibly preserved. The skin beneath the wrappings dry but whole, faintly golden. Across her chest, clutched in both hands, lay an object that gleamed through the dust. A dagger. It was shaped like an ankh, the symbol of life, but its proportions were all wrong. The loop at the top was elongated. The arms curved backward like hooked wings, and the blade extended downward, impossibly thin, as if forged from a single piece of lightless gold. Strange symbols wound across its surface, crawling as if alive. I felt something inside me stir, an old obsessive hunger that had driven me my entire career. I took it before anyone could stop me. The others protested, but I barely heard them. The dagger was warm. I could feel a pulse beneath its surface, a slow rhythmic throb that matched my heartbeat. When I looked at the markings, I felt dizzy, as though I were gazing through a window that was also a mirror. Later, I would tell myself it was greed, but that's not quite true. There was a voice, soft and ancient, whispering in the back of my mind. "You found me." I didn't tell the others. We sealed the sarcophagus and left before dawn. Behind us, the tomb exhaled once more, the sand shifting to cover our tracks as if eager to erase our intrusion. By sunrise, I was already thinking about how much the dagger would fetch. By sunset, I would realize I had brought something back that no man should ever touch. I returned home under rain. Massachusetts in late November is a graveyard of color. The world muted and half-rotten, the air filled with the smell of wet leaves and dying earth. My journey back from Egypt had been uneventful, disturbingly so. The customs officer in Boston barely glanced at my case before waving me through, uninterested in the false paperwork I'd spent weeks preparing. The dagger, wrapped in linen and hidden among harmless trinkets, crossed the Atlantic without a single question. It should have felt like a triumph. Instead, I felt followed. For the first few days, I tried to dismiss it as guilt or exhaustion. The desert sun does strange things to a man's mind, and I had spent too long breathing the dust of the dead. But even as I settled back into my small, dim apartment in Annam, a narrow third-floor walk-up overlooking the gray, sluggish library, the sense of something waiting only grew. The dagger lay on my desk. I had meant to sell it immediately, but I couldn't. Something about the object compelled hesitation, curiosity, an academic fascination that refused to die, even after my expulsion and disgrace. I told myself I merely wanted to identify it properly before setting a price. But the truth was simpler. I couldn't stop looking at it. Under lamplight, its surface seemed to shift. The metal, if it was metal at all, had the luster of old gold. Yet when I touched it, it felt like flesh, faintly pliant, faintly warm. The hieroglyphs crawling along its length defied every reference I possessed. They resembled known characters. The Eye of Ra, the Jed Pillar, the Ankh itself, but distorted, as though their meanings had been inverted. When I stared too long, the symbols appeared to rearrange themselves into words I nearly understood. I spent hours in my study, surrounded by piles of books and notes, searching through indexes of obscure dynasties, pre-dynastic cults, forbidden rituals whispered of in half-credible journals. There was nothing, no record of an inverted ankh, no mention of a queen whose name had been erased. The closest I came was a fleeting reference in a banned translation of the Book of Breathings, a line that read, "Beware the veiled sun, whose light is shadow, for in her rising, the stars forget their names." The phrase stayed with me. Nights stretched long and sleepless. My dreams were filled with sand. Black, endless sand stretching beneath a sky that never moved. The constellations above me burned cold and wrong, their geometry twisted beyond recognition. In the distance, a pyramid unlike any I had ever seen pierced the void, its angles bent inward, as if it were collapsing into itself. At its summit stood a figure in gold, slender, regal, her face hidden behind a mask shaped like the sun. I would always wake before I reached her. The dreams left me weak, my head heavy with a strange pressure that lingered into waking. I began hearing faint hums in the quiet of my apartment, a droning vibration that seemed to emanate from the dagger itself. Sometimes, when I passed my hand near it, The sound changed pitch as though responding. I grew paranoid. I locked my doors twice each night, covered the dagger with cloth, and yet I could feel it pulsing faintly in the dark, like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. On the 5th night, I found something new. I had fallen asleep at my desk, face down among the books. When I woke, my head throbbed, and the lamplight burned weakly against the pre-dawn gloom. The cloth had slipped from the dagger, exposing it to the dim light. My hand, I still don't know why, reached out to touch it. The moment my fingers brushed the surface, my vision fractured. I saw the desert again, but it was alive. The sand writhed like the skin of some buried beast. Figures moved across the dunes. Not men, but shadows in the shape of priests, their eyes burning with black fire. They circled a pit, chanting in a language that struck me with a terror older than thought. At the pit's center stood the same woman from my dreams. Her mask glowed like molten gold. When she turned toward me, I felt my body seize, my breath torn away. "You carried me home," she said. "You opened the gate." I screamed. The vision vanished. The dagger lay still beneath my trembling hand. For a long while, I simply sat there, listening to my own ragged breathing. The city outside was silent. No wind, no rain, only that faint rhythmic hum. Low and steady, like the sound of blood in my ears. I tried to convince myself it was a hallucination, a vivid dream, the result of guilt and insomnia. But when I turned to look at the mirror above my desk, I froze. The symbols on the dagger, those impossible twisting marks, were reflected there differently. In the mirror, they formed a word I had never seen before, and yet instinctively understood: Nekareph. That night, I locked the dagger away in a safe I hadn't used in years. And yet, as I write this now, I can still feel it, moving behind the metal door. Sleep has become a punishment. I dread it now. The slow surrender of consciousness, the feeling of sliding into that other world where the desert waits for me. I can't say when the dreams became more than dreams, but I know this much. Each night, they grow clearer, deeper, truer. The black desert stretches forever. It's not the Egypt I knew. There are no stars as I remember them. Only one, vast and unnatural, hanging low on the horizon. The priests kneel before it, their forms thin and insect-like, wrapped in rotting linen and gold thread. Their heads are shaved, their faces blank, save for blackened sockets where eyes should be. And yet they see. I feel their gaze on me. At the center of that endless plain stands a dais of obsidian, polished smooth as glass. Upon it rests the woman, the pharaoh, though no record of her reign exists in any text known to man. She does not move, and yet her presence fills the void like the pulse of a second heart. Her crown gleams like a dying sun. Her mask burns with shifting hieroglyphs that rearrange themselves with each breath I take. They pray to her, no, not exactly to her, but through her. Their chant rises in a language that coils around the mind like smoke. Slow, beautiful, unbearable. Every syllable seems to mean everything and nothing at once. Above them, the black star pulses. It is a wound in the sky, bleeding darkness instead of light. And when it beats like a living thing, the entire desert breathes with it. I can feel its rhythm in my bones, in my teeth, even in the soft tissue of my eyes. It feels divine, majestic, and terrible all at once. Sometimes I think I am worshipping it too. When I awaken, my room is heavy with silence, as though the world itself is holding its breath. The air smells faintly of iron and something sweet, like old perfume. And always, I hear it, that whispering hum from the safe. I have tried to ignore it. However, all my efforts were in vain. The sound never stops. Last night, I pressed my ear against the safe. The metal was cold, but I could hear it clearly. Not the dull vibration I first mistook for machinery, but something softer, almost human. A breath, a murmur, a voice just beneath the threshold of understanding. It spoke, not loudly, not with any force, but with the kind of calm that slips past reason. A woman's voice, the same I heard in the desert, in the space between my dreams. "Let me out," she said. "Let me out, and all your troubles will vanish. Your failures, your disgrace, the loneliness that gnaws at your bones. I can give you what you've lost." The words did not echo in the air. They bloomed inside my head. I stumbled back, trembling, but the sound followed. It filled the apartment, sweet and measured, every syllable heavy with familiarity. It was not the voice of a stranger. It was the voice of someone I once knew, or maybe someone who knew me. "You carried me home," she whispered again. "You chose to keep me. That makes you mine, Nathaniel." For a long time, I stood staring at the safe, heart hammering, every nerve in my body demanding I open it. I could almost see her there, coiled within the metal, golden and serene. But I didn't. Instead, I turned every lock in my apartment and sat through the night with the lights burning, writing this down by shaking hand, as if setting the words on paper could make them less real. It hasn't helped, because even now, as I write, I can feel something moving inside that safe. Breathing. The air hums with the promise of her voice, waiting to be heard again. And a terrible thought keeps circling in my mind. Perhaps I never brought the dagger home at all. Perhaps it brought me. The boundary between waking and dream has simply dissolved, ground to dust like everything else. My mind feels bruised, my thoughts slippery. I try to keep a record of time, but the days blend together, soaked in that same soft hum leaking from the safe. It never stops now. The sound has changed, grown layered, like a choir whispering beneath the hiss of static. When I walk past the safe, the words become clearer, and my name slips through the noise like a thread of silk. "Nathaniel, you've been away too long." I tell myself it's stress, isolation, guilt gnawing holes through reason. But how then do I explain what happened last night? I woke to the sound of trickling, faint, dry, steady. At first, I thought it was rain against the window, until I remembered the sky outside was frozen with stars. I followed the sound, bare feet scraping across the floorboards, and stopped by the door. Something was spilling from the keyhole. I knelt, half asleep, and brushed my fingers against it. Grainy, coarse sand, black as soot, yet gleaming faintly in the lamplight, as though each particle contained a reflection of that damned star from my dreams. I gathered a handful, warm, impossibly warm, and the moment I closed my palm around it, I felt movement. The sand shifted, almost breathing, and a faint pulse thrummed against my skin. The shock made me drop it, scattering the grains across the floor. They vanished before they hit the boards, sinking into them as though the wood were soft as water. When I leaned closer, the keyhole was empty again. I do not remember how long I sat there afterward, staring at the door, but I remember the fear, not of the supernatural but of my own mind. If I was hallucinating, it was far too precise, too consistent. My senses conspired against me in ways only the Real could manage. I needed a distraction, a reason to think of anything but the voice in the safe, and the sand that shouldn't exist. So I did something stupid. I contacted an old associate, a man named Howard Carswell, collector of unverified antiquities, which is a polite way of saying he buys stolen things and asks no questions. I dealt with him before, back when I still believed in the honesty of desperation. He owed me money, and I knew the mention of a unique Egyptian artifact would bring him running. His reply came within an hour. "If what you say is true, I'll double whatever you ask. Bring it to me tomorrow night. Midnight, the docks at Ingworth." I agreed. The dagger, when I retrieved it from the safe, was colder than ice. I don't remember unlocking the safe. My hand seemed to move on its own. The moment the metal touched the air, the room dimmed. Shadows crawled along the walls as though drawn toward it. I placed it on the table and turned away, but found my eyes constantly drifting back. Its shape, that fusion of dagger and ankh, was hypnotic, almost obscene in its elegance. The hieroglyphs along the blade writhed faintly, rearranging themselves whenever I blinked. I've spent my life studying such markings, but nothing in the museum archives or field notes ever resembled this. They weren't Egyptian, they weren't human. They seemed to describe movements of thought, cycles of perception. Symbols meant to be read not by the eyes, but by whatever lies behind them. And when I looked too long, they looked back. I don't mean that metaphorically. For a split second, I felt something observing me through those inscriptions, like an intellect pressed against the inside of a window pane, waiting for me to open it. The whisper followed soon after, soft and low, barely brushing the air. "You are close, Nathaniel, so close. Do not sell me. Use me." I turned on every light, packed the dagger into its wrappings, and forced myself to ignore the voice. The streets outside were empty, the night clean and cold. When I passed a window, I saw my reflection. The face that looked back had my eyes, but the skin was gray and dry as parchment. And where my mouth should have been, a faint golden line shimmered, the shape of an ankh drawn in blood. I stumbled away, knocking over a chair, heart hammering in my throat. When I looked again, the reflection was normal. The dagger wrapped beside me, the ticket to Ingworth folded in my coat pocket. If I can just sell it, if I can just hand it off, maybe I can leave all this behind. But the sand has begun to reappear. I find it in the folds of my sheets, in my shoes, in the corner of my desk. Every grain glitters faintly, like stars glimpsed through smoke. And beneath the sound of my pen scratching, I hear her whisper again, closer now, almost tender. "You cannot sell what already belongs to me." The train to Ingworth arrived long after dusk, though by the time I stepped off it, the world might as well have been midnight. Fog, that was my first impression. A pall of it so dense and colorless that the street lamps appeared as dull globes suspended in cotton. It muffled everything. Footsteps, voices, even the sound of the ocean I knew was close by. The air reeked faintly of salt and rot. Ingworth had always been a strange town, but I'd never known it to feel dead. Windows were boarded up, doors chained. What few figures I saw moving in the mist walked with an odd hunched gait, their heads down as if wary of being seen. My breath came out in trembling plumes as I made my way down toward the docks, following the dim glow of lanterns that flickered in and out of the fog. The streets grew narrower, the cobblestones slick beneath my boots. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolled, echoing like the call of a creature beneath the sea. The docks appeared at last, their skeletal outlines barely visible through the haze. A single figure waited there, tall, thin, wrapped in a dark oilskin coat that shimmered faintly with moisture. His hat was pulled low, obscuring his face, but I recognized him by the uneven gait as he turned. "Mr. Carswell?" I called. The man chuckled, a dry sound like paper tearing. Carswell became seriously ill. He lifted his face, and I saw eyes pale as fishbelly, lips cracked with salt. Not Carswell, not anyone I knew. "I'm his proxy," he said, voice thin as the mist around us. "He told me you'd bring something rare, something old." I swallowed hard. "Who are you?" "Names are irrelevant where I come from," he murmured. "You have the relic?" Every instinct screamed at me to turn and leave, but greed, that small stubborn spark, drove me to open the satchel and reveal the dagger. Even through its wrappings, the air seemed to tighten. The fog coiled inward, as if drawn to it. The old man unwrapped the cloth with careful reverence. When the blade was bare, his face twitched, first in awe, then in something like recognition. "The veiled sun," he whispered. "So, it truly survived the burial." His fingers trembled as he traced the edge, not touching it directly but hovering just above. "Do you understand what you've stolen?" "It's a ceremonial relic," I said automatically. "Fourth dynasty at best. I only want what it's worth." He smiled. A slow, toothless stretch of lips that looked more like a wound opening. "Oh, it's worth more than you can imagine." He reached into his coat and withdrew a bundle of notes. Crisp American dollars, bound in faded red string. There must have been several thousand. Half now, half upon authentication. I nodded, my pulse thudding with disbelief. "Deal." We exchanged items. Money for dagger. his hand steady as he rewrapped the artifact in the cloth. But as soon as the weight of the blade left my possession, something inside me snapped. It began as a chill that slithered up my spine, then bloomed into an overwhelming urge. Not a thought, not a decision, but a command. A voice inside, soft and absolute. He cannot leave. The dagger must feed. Before I understood what I was doing, my hand shot forward. The cloth fell away as I seized the dagger from his hands, heavy and impossibly cold. The old man's eyes wide with something between horror and recognition. I lunged. The blade sank beneath his ribs with a wet sound. A burst of warmth splattered across my hands. He gasped once and clutched at my arm. His mouth moved, forming words I couldn't fully hear. Something like, "She is awake." And then he crumpled, falling to the boards with a hollow thud. For a moment, the world went utterly still. The fog around us rippled, as though disturbed by invisible wind. Beneath the pier, I heard the sea whispering. Not the familiar rhythm of waves, but a strange chanting, low and rhythmic, pulsing in time with my heartbeat. My breath came in short, panicked bursts. I stared at the dagger, the blade slick with blood, yet gleaming with a light that wasn't entirely reflected. The hieroglyphs pulsed faintly, as though drinking the color from the world. "No," I whispered. Shit. I dropped it. It didn't clatter. It simply fell soundlessly, as if the wood swallowed it whole. When I looked down, it lay there gleaming, unblemished. Without thinking, I picked it up again. The compulsion returned instantly, a violent shudder coursing through me. My hand trembled, every instinct screaming to drive the blade into something, into someone. I staggered to the edge of the pier, fighting the urge with every fragment of will I had left. "Go to hell," I hissed, and hurled the dagger into the black water. It vanished beneath the waves with barely a splash. For several seconds, I stood there, chest heaving, waiting for something to happen. Nothing did. The fog pressed close, thick and silent. The sea beneath was calm. The body at my feet lay twisted, half in shadow. I wanted to turn it over to confirm what I'd done, but my stomach rebelled. Instead, I stumbled back toward the street, wiping my hands on my coat, breath ragged. I needed to leave now. The first train out of Ingworth wasn't until dawn, but I couldn't stay here. Not with the body cooling behind me, not with that thing lurking in the depths. As I hurried up the slope, I caught one last glimpse of the ocean through the mist. The waves shimmered faintly, as though stirred from below, and for an instant, just before the fog swallowed the horizon, I could have sworn I saw a faint golden gleam beneath the water, like an eye opening. The rhythm of the train wheels usually lulled me into uneasy sleep. That night, it only kept time with my thoughts, each metallic clatter echoing the memory of the blade sinking into flesh. Outside the window, the world passed as a blur of darkness and faint lights. I sat motionless in the corner seat, clutching my coat tight around me despite the oppressive warmth of the cabin. My hands still smelled faintly of iron, even after I'd scrubbed them raw in the station restroom before boarding. The blood was gone, but the feeling, the sticky weight of it would not wash away. I told myself it was over. The dagger was gone, hurled into the sea. The fog, the old man, the whispers, all of it would stay buried in that godforsaken town. I repeated those words in my head like a prayer. It's over, but every time the train rattled over a joint in the track, I felt the vibration climb up through my boots and into my bones, like something following the sound, something tapping in rhythm with it. The same hollow cadence I'd heard echoing through the tomb walls in Egypt. I tried to shake it off. I leaned against the window, watching the fields roll by in moonlight. My reflection looked pale, almost translucent. For an instant, just before the train entered a tunnel, I thought I saw another face overlapping mine. A woman's, regal and cold, with faint gold light glimmering where eyes should have been. The darkness swallowed her before I could blink. When the train finally hissed to a stop at Annam Station, dawn had begun to stain the sky the color of old parchment. I disembarked into thin, misty air, my limbs heavy, head pounding. As I unlocked the door to my apartment, a flood of ordinary smells welcomed me. Dust, old books, coffee grounds. For the first time since Egypt, I felt something like relief. I tossed my bag onto the floor, exhaled shakily, turned on the lamp in my study, and froze. There, upon my desk, where I'd left only stacks of papers and a half-empty whiskey glass, lay the dagger. It rested exactly in the center of the blotter, gleaming faintly despite the dim light. The ankh-shaped hilt was perfectly dry, as if it had never touched water. For a moment, I simply stared, uncomprehending. My mind refused to process what I was seeing. My thoughts turned sluggish, disconnected. Then came the drop, that sickening plunge of realization, and something inside me cracked. "No," I whispered. "No, that's impossible." I stumbled backward, heart hammering in my chest. My breath came fast, shallow. The air felt too thick to draw in. I blinked hard, hoping the vision would vanish. A trick of exhaustion, a hallucination born from guilt. But the dagger remained. Its metal seemed to pulse faintly, the same wrong geometry carved along its blade. The lines moved, not like living things, but as though light itself bent around them, warping, twisting, rewriting. I clutched my head, trying to think. Maybe I'd imagined throwing it away. Maybe I'd blacked out, retrieved it somehow. Maybe. Tapping. The sound came from the far corner of the room. A soft, deliberate tap like fingernails against wood. I spun, searching the shadows, every nerve aflame. Nothing there. Only the faint creak of the floorboards and the pounding in my ears. My vision tunneled. The walls seemed to tilt inward, breathing with me, whispering with every exhale. My pulse roared in my skull. My chest constricted, too tight, too shallow. The edges of my vision darkened. I was having a panic attack. I knew the symptoms. I'd had them before, after the expulsion, after the humiliation of being branded a fraud. But this time it felt different. This was recognition. A memory not my own whispered at the back of my mind. The sensation of sand beneath bare feet, the taste of ancient air, the sound of chants rising from 1,000 throats. "Let me out," said a voice. Soft, female, echoing from nowhere and everywhere at once. "You've already opened the door, Nathaniel." I stumbled toward the desk, my shaking hand reaching for the dagger despite myself. Its surface was ice cold, the touch numbing my fingers instantly. "You were chosen," the voice continued. "You remember the black star, don't you? For an instant, just an instant, I saw it. Behind my eyes, a sky I'd never known. Black and depthless, dominated by a single burning point that pulsed like a living wound. Around it knelt figures in gold masks, their shadows stretching for miles across a sea of black sand. I tore my hand away. The room lurched violently. The dagger fell, clattering against the floorboards. The first real sound in what felt like hours. I sank to my knees beside it, gasping, sweat running down my face. When I looked up, my reflection in the glass-fronted bookcase across the room didn't match my movements. In the faintest whisper, it mouthed the same words that still rang inside my head. "You can't throw away what you were meant to keep." I no longer wanted to be in that house. The air inside felt thick, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for me to break. So I began walking, long aimless walks through the streets of Annam, or sometimes along the fog-choked riverbanks outside town, where the reeds whispered in the wind. I told myself that as long as I stayed away from the desk, from the dagger, I might still be myself. But the world had already begun to thin. I could feel it like a veil wearing out under pressure. Every reflection, every darkened window seemed to bend slightly, showing angles that shouldn't exist. Sometimes, in the reflection of a shop window, I caught sight of dunes rolling under a black sun. It happened one afternoon, while I was walking near the old mill road. The world flickered. The gray Massachusetts sky drained of light, and I stood not on pavement, but on sand. Fine dry grains of obsidian black stretched in every direction. The air hummed with low chanting. Shapes moved in the haze, kneeling figures in tattered robes, their faces hidden, their voices rising and falling like the tide. And then I saw her, the pharaoh, the same one from my dreams, a woman draped in white and gold, her mask gleaming like the surface of a dying sun. She sat upon a half-buried throne, her gaze fixed upon me, or rather, upon another me. I saw myself standing before her, dagger in hand, its blade glimmering with a faint oily sheen. I watched as that other Nathaniel pressed the ankh-shaped point into his own solar plexus. The sand drank his blood eagerly. The chanting grew louder, vibrating through the desert, through my bones. And then she rose. The masked queen stepped forward, her presence immense yet tender. She placed her hand upon his bowed head, upon my head, and spoke without words. "Beloved vessel, do not fear the crossing." I gasped, the vision collapsed around me. When I came to, I was lying in the middle of the road, clutching at my chest, breath shallow and broken. A few strangers had gathered nearby, unsure whether to help or flee. I couldn't speak. All I could do was stare at my trembling hands. And for just a moment, beneath my fingernails, I thought I saw black sand. The days that followed were only fragments of time, torn and uneven, stitched together by exhaustion and fear. I stopped eating. I don't know how long I lay in bed before realizing that the walls of my apartment had changed. At first, I thought it was mildew, the kind that creeps into old plaster when the air grows damp. But it wasn't. The marks had structure. Curving lines, slanted strokes, symbols that seemed to twist when I wasn't looking. Hieroglyphs. And not Egyptian as any scholar would recognize them. They pulsed faintly in the dark, as if written in something that breathed. I scrubbed at them with a rag until my fingers bled, but the stains only deepened, as if the wall itself were skin and I had only angered it. That night, when I tried to sleep, the chanting began again. The same low chorus from my dreams, echoing through my room though I was alone. When I turned on the lamp, the light flickered red, and for an instant, I saw the black desert spread out around me, the walls of my apartment dissolving into dunes. My bookshelves sank into the sand. The hieroglyphs burned like constellations overhead. I saw myself again, standing before her throne, the dagger raised, point glinting above the solar plexus. Every time I blinked, the scene repeated. Every breath became a rehearsal of that motion. Every heartbeat pulsed in rhythm with the chant. When I finally tore my gaze away, the room was quiet again, except for the soft hum coming from my desk drawer, the drawer where I had locked away the dagger days ago. I tried to resist. I left the apartment, wandered until my legs shook, stayed in cheap hotels, even tried sleeping in the library one night. But no matter where I went, I'd wake up with the dagger nearby, on the nightstand or balanced across my chest like a lover's hand. By then, the hieroglyphs had begun following me too. I saw them carved into the frost on windows, traced in the steam of my breath, even drifting across the faces of strangers on the street. And with every sighting, the voice, her voice, grew clearer. "You are the bridge, Nathaniel. Your wound will open the way." I pressed my hands against my chest, feeling for the spot, that same place from the vision, and I swore I could feel warmth there, a faint heartbeat beneath my own. Something ancient was waking, something that had waited for millennia in sand and shadow, and the dagger, that cursed beautiful relic, waited patiently, gleaming with the promise of release. It happened on a night when the air felt wrong, too heavy, too warm, as if the desert itself had rolled unseen across the Atlantic and settled over Massachusetts. The moon was an orange wound in the sky, smothered by clouds that moved against the wind. I remember thinking that the streetlights outside my window flickered from something, moving beneath the skin of the world. I don't remember deciding to take the dagger out. My body acted on its own. My hands were trembling, yet sure, puppet by some ancient will that had waited longer than history itself. I unlatched the desk drawer, and there it was, the ankh-shaped dagger, resting on the velvet like a living thing. Its surface breathed, gold and onyx shifting in waves. Those impossible hieroglyphs turned as though reading me. The air grew thick with a hum that seemed to come from inside my skull. The lights went out. I don't remember walking to the mirror, yet I stood before it. My reflection warped and swimming in the half-dark. My eyes looked sunken, hollow, like wells opening into the black sand I had seen in dreams. My breath fogged the glass, and with each exhale, I heard whispers, "Open the way." The dagger felt warm, almost tender in my hand. Its edge shimmered faintly like sunlight through water. My chest rose and fell faster and faster, until the rhythm became something other. I felt it, the pulse of the black star burning behind my ribs. The voice came then, soft and feminine, closer than breath. "All that you are, all that you were, will feed the gate. Let the light within the sun die, so that my sun may rise." I pressed the dagger's tip to my upper abdomen. I should have screamed, should have hesitated, but I didn't. The metal slid through flesh as though it met no resistance. There was no pain, only warmth, spreading outward, searing and infinite. And then, everything stopped. The clock froze mid-tick. The dust in the air hung motionless. Even the sound of my heartbeat ceased. I was suspended in amber silence, staring at my reflection, but it wasn't my face anymore. It was hers. Behind me, the walls dissolved into a vast expanse of shifting black dunes. The ceiling broke open, revealing a sky without stars. Only a massive swirling void, where the black star burned like an open wound in creation. She descended, Nekareph, the veiled sun. I couldn't recall my name, my home, my life. Only her, only Nekareph. "You have opened the gate, my faithful one," she said. "Through your wound, I pass into the light of men. You are no longer Nathaniel Graves. You are my disciple." The first light beneath the black star. Outside, the wind began to howl. Through the apartment windows, I saw a storm of sand rising from nowhere, swallowing the streets of Annam. It devoured the trees, the lampposts, the world itself. People screamed, though I could not hear them. The sand pressed against the glass, whispering in languages no throat could form. And still, Nekareff's hand rested gently on my face, her voice calm amid the chaos. "Do not fear the storm, my child. The desert returns to its own." Then the room was gone, the world was gone, and there was only her light, black, endless, consuming. I awoke to silence, not the familiar earthly kind, not the hush of morning snow or the stillness after thunder, but an absolute suffocating silence, as if the world had forgotten how to breathe. For a moment, I didn't remember where I was. The storm, the dagger, the woman in gold. It all shimmered before my eyes like a fever dream. I lay on the cold wooden floor of my study, staring up at the ceiling fan as it revolved lazily in the half-light. Then I noticed something. There was no wound, no blood, not even the faintest scar upon my chest. My shirt was torn where the blade should have pierced, but my skin beneath was smooth, unbroken, as if flesh and time had refused to acknowledge what had transpired. I pressed my fingers to the spot where I remembered the blade entering, expecting pain, and felt instead a faint rhythmic pulse that did not align with my heartbeat. It was slower, deeper, as if something vast beneath the world's surface were breathing through me. The dagger was gone completely. No trace of it on the floor, no mark where it had fallen, no shadow in the drawer, only a faint impression in the velvet, as though something ancient had rested there for centuries, and finally, mercifully, been reclaimed. Yet I felt better. That was the strangest part. The heaviness in my mind had lifted. The tremors in my hands were gone. My body felt light, renewed, my thoughts clear, or so I thought at first. I laughed aloud, the sound breaking the dreadful silence. And for a fleeting instant, I almost believed I had survived some nightmare delirium. Then I turned to my desk. My notebook lay open, its pages filled with handwriting I barely recognized. The words were mine, but the hand that wrote them trembled with feverish intensity. I skimmed the last page, an account of my ritual, if one could call it that, and a coldness crept up my spine. The ink was still wet. I must have written it moments ago, though I remembered nothing of doing so. As I reached for the pen, another thought intruded, not my own. It came like a whisper from a long distance, threaded with warmth and authority. Finish it. So I did. I began to write. Each word felt heavier than the last, as though they were being dredged from some immense depth beneath my mind. At first, I tried to describe what had happened, to cling to my own perspective. I, Nathaniel Graves, looter, thief, survivor. But as the minutes passed, those words seemed childish, irrelevant. My name began to feel wrong in my mouth, like a word from a language I no longer spoke. My memories were fading, not eroding slowly, but vanishing in great sweeping waves. The image of the tomb, the sound of the desert wind, the faces of my companions, all gone. In their place came something vast and inhuman. Flashes of black dunes under an alien sky, chants in a language built from the hum of stars. And above it all, the black star. How can I describe it? Words are a mockery of what it is. It is not a sun, nor a void. It is both and neither. Imagine an eye that gazes from outside of time, its pupil an abyss of shimmering darkness that drinks light and thought alike. Around it, filaments of luminescent dust spiral like dying galaxies, each thread a scream of creation unmade. It beats like a heart of cosmic ruin, and every pulse births a soundless echo that bends the very memory of space. When I close my eyes, I see it hanging over the black desert, immense, sacred, merciless. The priests kneel beneath it, their shadows stretching to impossible lengths. They do not pray for mercy. They pray for union, for dissolution. And somewhere among them I stand, or once stood, robed in gold and shadow, the ankh dagger pressed against my chest. A voice whispering that I am home. The memories come faster now. They are not mine, yet I feel them as truths older than the pyramids. The building of a temple to the veiled sun. The ascent of Nekareph, her mask shining brighter than any mortal dawn, her hand raised toward that terrible holy star. I see her not as a corpse, but as a queen of black fire and silence, ruling over an empire that never truly died, merely slept within the desert's marrow. My pen trembles, my handwriting falters, the English words bending, shifting, turning into those same serpentine glyphs that once writhed upon the dagger. I no longer understand what I am writing, but I must write. Something in me demands completion. The voice returns. Do not fear the forgetting. You are not losing yourself. You are becoming one with the black star. I want to protest. I want to scream that I am Nathaniel Graves, that I stole, I sinned, I bled for greed and curiosity. But even those confessions crumble as I write them. Who is Nathaniel? A shadow, a vessel, a name that was never meant to last. The candle beside me burns low. The air smells faintly of sand, though every window is shut tight. I hear the soft hiss of dunes shifting in the distance. The page grows harder to see, though a faint light pulses beneath my skin. A black radiance, cold and tender. The last thing I remember clearly, before everything else becomes a sea of desert wind and starlight, is her voice, whispering behind my thoughts. The sun has set, my disciple. The black star rises. And as I write these final words, I no longer know whether I am recording the end of my story or the beginning of hers.